All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight, presented by FanDuel here at The Volume. Happy Thursday, everybody. A second time today for those of you guys who watched our show this morning. That was kind of an ugly basketball game. I thought the Clippers really played down to the Lakers' level in a bunch of different ways. I think that's the kind of game that you could trick yourself into thinking that things are close if you're a Laker, someone in the front office or someone in the ownership group. And hopefully they know better and can see through that, because the Lakers have some glaring issues. Tonight's show is going to be nice and simple. We're going to be covering the Clippers-Lakers, and then we'll be covering the Bucks and the Sixers. Earlier today, a few hours ago, I released about a 30-minute video that covered 7 different games from last night. So for those of you guys who missed that, remember to go back and check that out later. And then tomorrow night, there's a couple of different games that we're going to be covering on Saturday morning. So just keep that in mind. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Volume's YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss any show announcements. And last but not least, if for whatever reason you miss one of these shows and you can't get back over to YouTube to finish them, you can find them wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. But let's talk some basketball. So, if I asked you the biggest thing that jumped off of the screen for you between those two teams, you could point to a couple of different things, right? Like you could point to the fact that the Clippers look bigger on the perimeter, right? Which we're going to talk about. But I thought the thing that screamed off of the screen was the huge gap in offensive skill level. The Lakers last year were an intolerable watch, but it mostly had to do with effort and focus, care, competitiveness, and just a lot of stuff that will offend most fans, right? Like, this Lakers team might be just as bad. We don't know. I think they're a little bit better than last year as of right now. But the reality is like at least this team, you can feel them trying. And that will go a long way towards getting some support from the fan base. Last year, they just couldn't be bothered to care. And they fixed a lot of problems. They've added a great deal of youth and energy. Bringing in Darvin Ham has worked wonders for them, building a defensive scheme that works with their personnel and just getting them to buy in again. But the problem is when you put yourself in a predicament like the Lakers did, which is when you traded all of your, mid-level salaries, guys like, Alex Caruso, what would have been a mid-level salary had they retained him, or Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Montrezl Harrell, Kyle Kuzma. When you let go of those guys, what you did is especially to bring in a guy like Russ, that's such a huge salary and all of the problems that come with him, you put yourself in the tough position where the only way that you can find players to flank LeBron James and Anthony Davis is veteran minimum contracts and the mid-level exception. And the problem is when you target guys on the veteran minimum and mid-level exception, you're kind of picking one or the other in terms of skill sets, right? Last year, they were able to get guys like Carmelo Anthony and Malik Monk, guys that are good offensive players, but that are bad defensive players, right? Or maybe an old veteran that once upon a time was good, guys like Trevor Ariza and Avery Bradley, but obviously aren't what they once were. They went a different direction this year. They went with youth, but they got a bunch of guys that are competitive athletically. Juan Toscano-Anderson played really well on the defensive end of the floor tonight. Here's the problem. He literally can't shoot. His elbow is literally out to the side when he's shooting. He's left to right by a foot or so on every shot. He's long or short by a foot or so on every shot. He's just not a very good offensive player. That's just the reality of what you're going to get for a veteran minimum contract. You're going to get a player that might be pretty good at one or two things and is going to be pretty limited elsewhere with what he brings to the table. And what you're seeing here is the Lakers have solved one problem. They've plugged one hole, which is their youthful exuberance and their athleticism and their commitment to defense. But in the process, they've unplugged this other hole, which is perimeter shooting. Ironically, last year they didn't actually shoot as well as you would hope, but they had lineups that they could go to that could shoot. And more often than not, Frank Vogel just went away from those lineups for various reasons. But that offensive skill, it's going to be a bigger and bigger problem as the years go into the future. Because like I've said so many times, and the Clippers are a perfect example of this type of team, because they switch everything and because they have all these different guys that are tough to score on and that can cover multiple positions and can cover ground and they have length and they can contest shots, more important than ever, LeBron and AD might be able to get that first little bit of an advantage. They might be able to collapse the defense a little bit, but you need guys that can either knock down shots at a high level or that can continue to extend the advantage, meaning they're gifted ball handlers that read the floor well and can make reads, or they know when to cut, they know when to relocate. And simply put, like, you got to knock down these wide open jump shots that they're giving you. But the problem is they're simply not going to knock them down. They've shot really poorly 2 nights in a row, and they've got a roster full of poor shooters. So that's a result that they can come to expect. If they go out against the Blazers on Sunday afternoon and they shoot lights out, that's not reason to feel like they're, seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. That just means they shot well that night. In the aggregate, over the course of this season, they're really going to struggle to shoot the basketball because they simply do not have enough shooting. But everything else, I like what I'm seeing. LeBron looks fantastic. He's missing his jump shot right now, but that's going to come around. LeBron's a good jump shooter now, right? Having Darvin Ham in there to get the guys rebought in and recommitted to the team. There's a lot of stuff that's good. I still don't like what I'm seeing from Anthony Davis. He was pretty bad in the second half against Golden State. And then tonight, and I know he was banged up, but he still can't shoot. And he got absolutely bullied on the glass by Zubac, and it was leaving his feet too much. He left his feet on the play where he got hurt. Kawhi Leonard's not finishing over you, man. Stay on your feet. Block the shot. Just stick your hands up. If he makes an impossible fadeaway over the top of you, so be it. But AD would be my one big question mark right now, where it's like, okay, none of this matters unless he gets better. Because in order for the Lakers to have any chance to reach their eventual ceiling, they need him to be a bona fide top 10 player, which he has not played like so far through 2 games. But this kind of, and we're going to get to the Clippers here in a minute, but I think the story of this game continues to be the Lakers signing up to have a roster that's incapable of being a functional basketball team. Russell Westbrook, and I know I've talked a lot about how I want to be limited in how much I talk about him because I'm exhausted by it. I find the situation toxic. I feel bad for him now, even though he's put himself in this situation. It's just so awkward to watch that I just wish it was over for the sake of him, for his family, and for the Lakers organization so they can move forward. He was terrible in his first shift, and then he was pretty good in his second shift, and then he was terrible in his third shift, and then really bad offensively in his fourth shift, but he made some defensive plays. He did a nice job fronting Kawhi Leonard in the post. He forced 3 turnovers on Kawhi post-ups there at the end of the game. He's going to make some plays. Russ is a good basketball player. Russ is bad in his role for the Lakers, but he's not a bad basketball player. If you put him in a different situation and put him in a specific type of role, he could be functional. I don't know if he could do that for a great team, but he could do it for a mid-level to, a bad team somewhere around the league. But the problem is you're only getting these like pockets of good plays, right? Like there's a stretch of him making a couple defensive plays in the second quarter where he fights over the top of the screen and pokes the ball away. Or he, sees Paul George turn his back to him and runs in, or I think it might have been Marcus Morris, but he jumps in and gets a steal and they run out the other way. Or those fronting possessions on Kawhi Leonard that I was talking about. He makes some plays, but you're not getting consistent basketball positivity from him on a possession-by-possession basis because he's so helter-skelter and he hurts you in your spacing and he can't shoot the basketball and he can't make layups and struggles defensively on other possessions. Like there's all these bad things that come with it. And so what's frustrating about that, if you're a Lakers fan, is they had the means with which to remedy that issue. Had they flipped Russell Westbrook with, let's just use the Indiana trade for example. Let's say they get Buddy Hield and Miles Turner. Miles Turner, every possession is going to be a good rim protector. That's just what he is. His elite skill that he brings to this league, he's an elite rim protector. The Lakers got absolutely pulverized on the glass tonight, 58-38. You want to know why? All the perimeter players for the Clippers are big wings, and all the perimeter players for the Lakers are little guards. So every contested rebound, unless it's LeBron James and Anthony Davis, is going the other way. And even Anthony Davis was getting bullied a little bit tonight by Zubats. By bringing in a guy like Miles Turner, you raise your aggregate size, so you're getting help on the glass consistently, and you're getting a guy who's going to consistently be a good rim protector. And right now, he's a better spot-up shooter than Russ. So you getting a better basketball player just right up front. We haven't even talked about Buddy Hield and what he does to give you a legitimate spot-up threat. Buddy Hield can run pick and roll. He can run dribble handoffs. He has a consistent threat that he brings every single possession down the court. So the question becomes, are you going to, if you're a Russ fan, or if you're advocating for this, if you're Rob Pelinka and Jeannie Buss, are you going to continue to cling to the 6 or 7 good plays that Russ makes in a game when the, totality of his impact is not good? Or are you going to look at the fact that if you make this move, targeting guys like Buddy Hield and Miles Turner, who are good basketball players in the NBA, are they great basketball players? No. If they're your best players, you're going to suck. That's absolutely right. But in the roles that they would be on this Lakers team, they fill needs. And so instead of getting 6 or 7 good plays a game, you get consistent production in one shape or another. If they played this exact same basketball game, but Buddy Hield had a rough shooting night and Miles Turner had a rough shooting night, I'm getting much better aggregate size by having Miles Turner under the basket, clogging up space, getting rebounds, protecting the rim, helping now have tons of length on the floor with him, Anthony Davis, and LeBron. And then on the offensive end of the floor, even if they ignore him, they were also ignoring Russ. And then with Buddy Hield, even if he has a nightmare shooting night, he might not be able to make the positive plays that Russ makes defensively, but it's going to be more or less the same type of experience. Buddy Hield's not a great defender, neither is Russ. But on the offensive end of the floor, I'm going to get consistent spot-up threat, real gravity that's going to pull a defensive player out of position so that there are driving lanes that are available. And I haven't even talked about what happens when those guys play great. If Buddy Hield does shoot well, and if Miles Turner does shoot well. And so that's why if you're a Laker fan, you got to be looking at Rob Pelinka and Jeannie Buss here and going, you signed up for this. You said that you thought this roster was worth going into the season with, wasting an entire training camp full of opportunity to build continuity and burying yourself in a hole in the standings. And what I struggled to understand is, okay, so you hold out. Adrian Wojnarowski reported on Wednesday that the Lakers were potentially waiting for 20 games or so after Thanksgiving to get a really good feel for the trajectory of this team, right? And so what are you hoping to get in return for that? You're hoping to get, I don't know, maybe you save 1 draft pick. So instead of sending 2 firsts, you send 1 first, maybe, right? Or maybe you get, let's say 20% better players. So instead of getting Buddy Hield and Miles Turner, let's say you get 2 different role players that you believe are better. I'm not even going to present an example. Let's just pretend like random basketball players that are 20% better than Buddy Hield and Miles Turner. In the process, you've sacrificed a training camp worth of opportunity to build continuity. And when we get into the NBA regular season, you're just not practicing. Especially old teams, they just don't practice. They might have a dozen or so practices the rest of the year for all you know. So there's not going to be an opportunity to integrate these guys when you do make a move. And then what about the standings? The Clippers played like crap tonight. I usually have a rule. Let's talk about the winning team first. The Clippers don't deserve to be talked about. We're going to. They don't deserve it. They did not play well tonight. They deserve to lose that game. The only reason they won is they're playing a Lakers team that is so horribly flawed right now. But like the reality is that's a game you probably win. If the Clippers come into town and they play like that, you beat them with Miles Turner and Buddy Hield. Who knows what happens against Golden State? They're the best team in the league. But the point is by Thanksgiving, you might be 8-12. And you might be staring at a 6 or 7 game deficit from the 6th seed. Maybe not that big. Maybe something closer to 3 or 4 games. But a 3 or 4 game deficit in a stacked Western Conference to get out of the play-in tournament when you only have 60 games left, that's going to be hard to do. It's not just in a vacuum, all we have to do is play better. No. You have to play better than the Denver Nuggets. And you have to play better than the Dallas Mavericks. And you have to play better than the New Orleans Pelicans, who went into Brooklyn and beat the crap out of the Nets last night. You're up against a lot of really good teams here, and time is of the essence. And the longer you wait, in the bigger hole you dig for yourself, not only do you give yourself less time to ingratiate or integrate these new players that come in, but it might not even matter because of how far back you are in the standings. And so I think at this point, I think it was already inexcusable coming into the season for Rob and Jeannie to go that route. And it's only become even more apparent now that they're actually playing basketball. Now, to be clear, and I said this before the season, this is the last note I'll say on the Lakers before we move on to the Clippers. They are good enough with how hard they're playing with Darvin Ham, with how good LeBron James is, and with how good Anthony Davis is right now, even though he's not as good as I think he needs to be. Even with just this, they're going to compete. They're going to compete. They're going to be capable of floating around 500. They're not going to be a bad team. But again, like I said, especially with how tough their schedule here is at the beginning, you dig yourself in a little bit of a hole. It could be a problem when it comes to jockeying for position in the play-in tournament. But that's all I have for the Lakers right now. Let's talk about the Clippers for a few minutes. So, one other note really quick. We're going to take just like we did on Tuesday night, we're going to take a couple of questions from the chat at the end of the show. So make sure you put your questions in the YouTube chat. We will get to them before we get out of here tonight. So Kawhi looked okay. I thought he looked okay in the preseason too. He's bigger and stronger than he used to be. He's not moving nearly as well. I made a joke when we were talking in preseason. It kind of reminds me of like a basketball player that's in like a really good groove, who's really feeling like himself and he's at the top of his game, versus like that same player when he comes back from like a 10-day vacation where you're just like a step slow, your touch is a little off, your feel for the game's a little off. That's kind of what he looks like. He looks like Kawhi Leonard just got back from a 14-day vacation. All of you basketball players out there who play 3-4 times a week, you can relate very strongly to what I said there. But I mean, that's enough for this team because of how talented they are, and all they need is for him to be healthy throughout this season and to regain some sort of form by the time they get to the playoffs. Now, I had heard from somebody who would know that covers the league that there's a lot of intel that Kawhi's knee is degenerative. I had been hearing that from this person for years, basically. And I always just, as is always the case with any reporting, you got to take it a little bit with a grain of salt. Everyone hears things, and Kawhi's circle in particular is very airtight. So I never know what to believe when it comes to him. But this stuff with his load management is really strange. They played him one shift in the first half and then started him in the second half. So it's very clear that they want to like really overly manage his minutes. And what's strange about that is like, what are we like? He got hurt in, was it May? I think it was either May or June of last year. So we're coming up on a year and a half post injury here. Like, he should be no restrictions, just playing basketball as much as he can. So that lends me to believe that there is some serious concern about the condition of his knee. And that would scare me because, when I was talking about the Clippers as a top tier contender, they're going to be a very good team, even with Kawhi in his current state. But as a top tier contender, to contend with Boston, who has Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum playing like top 10 players, or with Golden State, who has Steph playing like he might be the best player in the world, and Andrew Wiggins rapidly on the ascent, and all of the talent they have there, in the Bucks, which you feel free to bet against Giannis if you want to. I'm not going to. With all that, you need Kawhi, the top 6 or 7 player in the world. And if his knee is degenerative, which we don't know, or if it's not capable of getting back to what it was, that changes the outlook of this particular team, especially since once you go past Kawhi and Paul George, their wings are long, but they're not overly quick anymore. Robert Covington is not as quick as he used to be. Nick Batum is not as quick as he used to be. Marcus Morris is not as quick as he used to be. Then you got Luke Kennard out there a lot, Vika Zubac. So like they could be kind of like almost like an aged out version of themselves. And that would really suck if Kawhi got healthy, when it's too late for this roster to actually capitalize on it. Paul George looked like he just wasn't even taking the game very seriously tonight. Only attempted one shot inside of 15 feet in the first half. Like I told you guys, the turnaround of Paul George's career, and this is a guy who had a horrible playoff resume, like basically went toe-to-toe with LeBron for a while when he was with the Pacers and then hasn't really had a playoff moment since. He had one point lost 5 playoff series in a row, but then it was like he kind of captured something and he was playing really, really well in that 2021 playoff and dragged the Clippers within 2 wins of the NBA Finals. But he did that by attacking the rim. That was what turned things around for him. When Paul George is putting his head down and going to the rim, it opens everything else up for him. Not only does it get his rhythm going at the line, but it keeps defenders on their heels in a way that allows him to get more separation on his pull-up jump shot. And when he's playing passive like that, it was almost like I saw a buddy of mine on Twitter who also played in college, who said something along the lines like it almost was like he was too cool for school to be out there. That was kind of the overall attitude I picked up from the Clippers. Reggie Miller was on this at the start of the fourth quarter. He's like, the Clippers should have put this game away, and they absolutely should have. The Lakers fought back into this game basically by getting steals and running out for transition layups and dunks. It's not like they were out executing the Clippers in the half court. It was laziness on the Clippers' part. So that was a little bizarre. You'd like to see a little bit more engagement out of Paul George. If I wanted to put a couple of bright spots on the Clippers, I'd say Marcus Morris. His post scoring was impressive. He's a very aggressive spot up shooter. I talk about this a lot. The difference between regular spot up shooting and aggressive spot up shooting. Aggressive spot up shooting pulls defenders towards you because they're scared that you're going to shoot even when they're not that open, right? But like passive spot up shooters, they know if they lunge at you a little bit that you're just going to pump fake. Like Austin Reeves, for instance, passive spot up shooter. If you even make an attempt to close out at him, it's a pump fake and he's looking to move the basketball. So I think that there's more value in what Marcus Morris does, where it's like, even if you close out at me a little bit slow, I'm just going to shoot with your hand in my face, and I like my chances of knocking this down. And then John Wall looked great. I told you guys in his first 2 preseason games, when he came off the bench, he was a little passive, was feeling things out, didn't really know when to be aggressive. Tonight, he was like, the Clippers were leaning on him, especially at the end of the game, to create shots. But from the open of his first shift, when he came into the game, he was aggressive. He was knocking down pull-up jump shots. He's still a big, strong guard that can get to the rim. He's not, the same John Wall that we knew from Washington, but he's still got plenty of burst left. That was a really nice pickup from the Clippers. I saw a lot of people being critical of that. In my thing, when the signing first happened, my approach was like let's watch him play. This guy has a very long resume of basketball success. Let's watch before we decide to do this anymore. But yeah, so as far as Clippers, they just this gets frame for a Clippers games. They're certainly capable of playing a lot better than they did, but I think they've just downed the Lakers' competition. And I think we'll see more over the course of this. To Philly. Remember, taking a couple questions from the chat at the end of the show. Drop them in the chat, and we'll get to them after we talk about this game. So, good win for the Bucks. Didn't have Chris Middleton. Apparently, he's dealing with a wrist injury. Pat Connaughton's out as well, a calf injury. Andrew Holiday had like an absolute nightmare shooting game. He was 2 for 15 from the field, but they grinded out this win with defense and late game execution. Giannis and Drew in particular were devastating to Philly as help defenders. There was a sequence in that first quarter. There was a play where Joel kind of like made a head fake on Brook Lopez, and Brook Lopez just went flying by him, and he had a drive to the basket. And Drew came from 2 passes away and shot like a missile underneath Joel Embiid and poked the ball free. It was one of the most bizarre basketball plays I've ever seen, because I've seen guys dig at the basketball. I've never seen them go from that far away all the way underneath a player and then come out on the other side with the basketball without fouling. It was a really impressive play. He was doing a lot. He did a great job on James Harden. James Harden just made some really tough shots over the top of him. And then Giannis, there was a play where Tobias Harris had the ball in the right kind of like long extended corner and just ripped through and had a straight line drive to the basket, went up for a dunk. Giannis was all the way in the short corner on the other side of the floor, just took 2 steps and just met Tobias at the top of the rim, or at the top of his jump, and blocked the shot away. And I was sitting there thinking, like, man, again, this is why I think Giannis is the best defensive player in the world. It's always a combination of all the different factors that take place in defense. I have seen Giannis be so devastating closing out to shooters on the 3-point line that Luka Doncic pulled him into isolation defense on him, knowing he wouldn't be able to score because he'd rather throw kick-out passes with a different defender closing out on him. I saw Giannis isolate Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid do like a Shaq spin move where he dropped his shoulder and then try to go up and dunk, and Giannis blocked the damn shot with his forearm. This is a player that is damn near unguardable in individual coverage anywhere else in the league, but Giannis is like just stonewalling him at the rim, and he can protect the rim as well as anybody else in the league. There are many different facets that go into defense in the NBA, and Giannis is great at all of them. And that is always going to be a differentiator between him and his peers at this point. LeBron's not the same that he was defensively at his peak. Kevin Durant has never been in the same stratosphere defensively as any of those guys. Steph Curry competes, but at his best, he's above average. And then Jokic and Embiid are matchup dependent in terms of their defense. When you're looking at the top players, and Luka's terrible. So when I'm looking at the top 7 or 8 players in the league, I have this all-world fantastic defensive player, and then a bunch of guys who are average to below average. So at that point, the fact that Giannis is a 3rd or 4th best offensive player in the league, he's just head and shoulders above everybody right now. I think that has to be acknowledged. He was patient on offense tonight, didn't force anything. I think he only took 16 shots, 8 assists, and 1 turnover. I told you guys earlier, over the course of the summer, I don't care about Giannis's jump shot. And he made a couple tonight. Made a big 3, made a pull-up jump shot, really nice pull-up jump shot in Joel Embiid's face. That doesn't matter to me because he cannot be guarded at the rim. What really matters is how well can he keep defensive players off of him coming in help by beating them with the pass. And right now, he's a better passer than most of the small forwards at his position in the league. That's not like, oh, he's okay, he can make some reads. No. He's like actually turning himself into an above average playmaker, and that's terrifying because that's the thing that turns him from the 6th or 7th best offensive player in the league to the 3rd or 4th best offensive player in the league. And when you pair that with what he does defensively, he's just the best player in the world. Late game execution from the Bucks pulled this one away after I tweeted out at the end of the fourth, right at the start of the fourth quarter. I was like, they need to run everything through James Harden the rest of this game. Joel Embiid's head isn't in it. If they do that, they have a chance to win. It's exactly what they did, and they made every single play down to when they got up by 2, and then the Bucks took over. Giannis had like a really nice spinning hook shot on Tobias Harris. There was a play where Drew Holiday was posting up on the right wing, or on the left corner, off of an offensive rebound, and James Harden got caught sleeping, and Grayson Allen cut to the basket. Again, Drew Holiday just making a smart play with the basketball, not forcing up a shot, waiting for things to develop. And then there was the game winner after PJ Tucker makes a couple free throws. Grayson drives to the left, kind of coming through the middle, and has no advantage. But Wesley Matthews relocates to the top of the key, and this is a huge thing for young basketball players to pay attention to. Like, you always want to move when you're off ball. You never want to stay stagnant. And the main reason why is because a defensive player has to keep track of man and ball. He's constantly looking back and forth between the two places. And if you stay in the same spot, you make his job easy. On this play, Tobias, right as he turned to look at Grayson Allen, on that exact moment in time, Wesley Matthews relocated. By the time Tobias Harris turned back around and looked, he was 10 feet away from him. Grayson made the pass. Wesley knocked down the shot, amounted to the game winner. Again, little basketball detail there. Relocating as a shooter instead of staying stagnant. Not only will that get you better looks, but it keeps the deep. If that same sort of thing happened over the course of a game, now Tobias Harris is going to be more attentive to Wes instead of to you, the ball handler, because he's scared of the relocating shooter. That kind of movement prevents what we call stagnation, when everyone just stands around and watches, and that just makes you a lot easier to guard. Joel Embiid looks badly out of shape and unfocused. He hasn't been seeing the floor well at all. He has 10 turnovers to just 8 assists so far through 3 games, and it really should have been 11 turnovers because you guys saw that swing pass or the kick-out pass to Tyrese Maxey that clearly went off of his fingers. He's also looked slow to react on defense. His body language, it just looks like he's not happy. It doesn't look like he even wants to be out there, which is just weird. And, I've talked about this a lot with Joel Embiid, but specifically He's a guy that's very lively and energetic when things are going well, but when things are not going well, he's a bad body language guy. He's a let up on defense guy. He just kind of like mentally checks out of a game when things aren't going well, and he wasn't playing well tonight. And what sucks about that is like, and this is the big thing, another little lesson for young basketball players. There's always a lot of basketball left. If you come out and you play like crap, Joel Embiid played like crap for 3 quarters. Here's the thing. If he could have just made 1 or 2 plays in that fourth quarter, they win the game. You got to understand, and then no one cares. Then everyone would look back and say, hey, you had a rough night, but we got the win. You made some big plays late. That's why you stay mentally engaged. That's why you stay focused on the game, because you will eventually have a chance over the course of 82-game season or a 30-game high school season or a 30-game college season. You're going to have good nights. You're going to have bad nights. But most of the games are going to be close. And at the end of games, you have opportunities to make plays. That's why you stay engaged, because that's when you have an opportunity to turn a bad night into a good night. I had Joel Embiid at 8th in my player rankings, and a lot of Philly fans disagreed with me. I think you could potentially put him above, I had Jason Tatum ahead of him. A lot of people disagreed with me. You put him above Jason Tatum, maybe he's at 7, but I don't think he has a realistic case above any of those guys above him. Jokic, Luka Doncic, LeBron, KD, Steph, and Giannis. And the reason why I have him down there is he's super inefficient away from the basket, especially in the playoffs. He doesn't see the floor well. He doesn't defend well in space or in transition. He's become a nightmare for Philly's transition defense. And then, like I said, he always checks out mentally when things don't go well. If this version of James Harden is real, and he was fantastic again tonight, we're going to talk about it in a second, then he's the best player on the team. And I know that sounds crazy, but when James Harden was in his prime in 2019, 2018, he was a top 6 or 7 player in the league. If he gets back into form, he's right up in there with all those guys, with Jokic and with Luka. That's how good James Harden is when he's playing like he is here through 2 games. He had 35, 8, and 7 in the first game, 31, 8, and 9 in the second game, 5 turnovers total through 2 games. And this is the big one that's really turning things around for James Harden. Did you guys know that James Harden only made 21 mid-range shots all last year? Through 2 games, he already has 12 two-point shots that are outside of the restricted area. That's a part of his shot diet that just didn't even exist before this. And there's a bunch of reasons why that matters. It avoids repetitiveness. If you're Drew Holiday, I'm guarding James Harden 40 possessions tonight. If I see the same thing 35 times, by the time I get to those last 5 possessions, I kind of know where I need to be. I know where my body position is. I know his cues that kind of give away what he's planning on doing. I know what his counters are going to be. If you do this, if you do high isolation or high pick and roll every single possession during the course of the game, and you only take step back threes or go all the way to the rim for layups, it just gives Drew Holiday a simplified defensive decision-making process. But if you are scoring from everywhere on the floor, it keeps it way more out of balance. I thought it wasn't just pulling up for mid-range shots. It was also him attacking off of the catch. Like he would, on the last pull-up jumper he made, I think it was the one that tied the game before the PJ Tucker free throws. Like the ball was moving around, and he ended up catching it after a couple actions on the right wing. And instead of pulling or stagnating, as the closeout was coming, he put the ball on the floor and he got to 12, 13 feet and he made a pull-up jump shot. Those are things that didn't exist in his offense in the past. And I think it supplements the the tougher shots that he makes. Like James Harden couldn't make a step back 3 tonight to save his life. It didn't matter. He still got 31 because he was making everything else. That's why variety in your shot diet matters. And then it's about size advantage. Drew Holiday is one of the best defenders in the league, but he's not big enough to guard James Harden in the post. He's not big enough to stop James Harden when he's driving into his chest and giving him that little off arm, that little shove, and stepping back at 13, 14 feet. That's a great shot for James. But if Drew Holiday is guarding James Harden and he takes nothing but step back threes, then you're not really making him pay for being small now, are you? There's so many upsides that come from James Harden having more variety in his shot profile. Not to mention just the defensive coverages. Defenses are designed, especially pick and roll coverages in particular, are designed to give up mid-range jump shots at the expense of taking away the three-point line and taking away the rim. It's a market inefficiency that's there for the taking. So it's good to see James taking advantage of that. He led that comeback when things looked really bad for them in the middle of the third quarter, transitioning into that fourth quarter. He was making plays with the pass. He was making shots. Just a really, really impressive game from James Harden. His defense was better too. He grabbed some key contested rebounds. He did have that really bad mistake on Grayson Allen where he was caught sleeping on a back cut. But, it's not going to happen overnight with James. If he buys in over the course of the season, he'll make fewer of those mistakes. This is why Sixers fans should be excited. And I know, look, I get it. You're 0-2. You got embarrassed by the Celtics, and then you barely lost to the Bucks in a game that they controlled most of the night, and they came back. You came back and you made it a game. They beat you. It's depressing. I get it. Here's a little glass half full approach for you, though. You traded Ben Simmons, a very flawed basketball player that is by no means even in consideration to be a top 30 player in this league. Okay? That's who you sent out. In return, you got James Harden at the absolute floor of his value. He will never be less valuable than he was when that deal was made. Now he looks like a top 10 player. So you've added a top 10 player to the roster. Tobias Harris and Tyrese Maxey look like awesome guys flanking you on the wing. PJ Tucker and Daniel House have added some toughness on the wing as well. PJ made some big plays tonight. All of this is good, except for Joel Embiid. It showed up to the season not ready to play. Okay? And yeah, that sucks. But he's going to figure it out. And when he does, you'll have 2 top 10 players and a great arsenal of role players to flank them. So I know it can be depressing. I know it can be frustrating. No one likes starting 0-2, but there's a light at the end of this tunnel. You're not the Lakers. You don't have a severe talent deficit against everyone you play. You just, your best player, or maybe your second best player, isn't playing well right now. And he will eventually, and when he does, things will get better. All right, let's get to some questions from the audience. I'm going to bring our producer Josh on, and we'll do 2 of them tonight. Or maybe not. Doesn't look like we have Josh. All right. Well, that's all I have for tonight, guys.
Can you hear me?
Sincerely appreciate you. Wait, we got him? Josh, you there?
Yeah, that's my fault.
All right, let's hear it. What do you got?
All right, so from Great Prime, we have, what do you think Philadelphia has to do to improve to be a contender?
So again, we got a similar question to this on Tuesday night. I don't think it's a personnel issue. I really don't. You have 2 top 10 players in the league if what we're seeing from James Harden is real. You've got Tyrese Maxey, one of the most exciting young guards in the league. I think he's better than Jordan Poole and Tyler Herro, in my opinion. I've got Tobias Harris, who, yes, if he's your best player, it's not great. Yes, he might be a little bit overpaid, but for your 4th best player, for what he can do defending on the wing, he didn't shoot the ball well tonight, but he can make plays on offense as well. You're in great shape there. You have some wing depth now with PJ Tucker and with Daniel House. You haven't even attempted to really use Matisse Thybulle to this point. I think they're in great shape. And so it's just as simple as defend. They really did not defend well on Tuesday night. They defended much, much better tonight. Their best player, Joel Embiid, just sucked. He played horrible. It was one of the worst games I've seen him play. If if LeBron goes out on Sunday against the Blazers and plays like crap, the Lakers will lose. It's just when your best player, whose job it is to absorb so much attention and responsibility on the floor, when he doesn't play well, you're screwed. That's just the nature of the way the NBA works. Right now, this is on Joel Embiid. He'll get it together, and when he does, the Sixers will be fine. All right, we'll do one more question.
All right, this comes from Alex Lagora. He says, aside from the Pacers, are there other teams willing to trade with Los Angeles?
So there are a bunch of teams that have been mentioned. I actually had somebody send me a direct message during the game tonight that was really interesting. He said, what if the Lakers did a 3-team deal and got, or even just a separate deal, but essentially did the Miles Turner Buddy Hield deal, but also sent like Kendrick Nunn to the Spurs for Doug McDermott as part. And I think you would actually have to structure that as a 3-team deal for it to work. But either way, targeting a guy like Doug McDermott, because It gives you a little bit more wing size and shooting, although Doug McDermott obviously has some flaws. You get Miles Turner and Buddy Hield. And there's kind of a guard glut on this team. Buddy Hield coming in kind of fulfills everything that Kendrick does offensively anyway. I kind of like that option. You obviously still have Charlotte on the table. Gordon Hayward looked okay in his first game. I'll be curious to see how he looks over the first quarter of the season, because he's an interesting option, especially since the Lakers want to play AD at the 5. There's always, and then with this Victor Wembanyama thing, there's just going to be 2 or 3 additional teams that kind of come up as options. The problem I had with waiting is, let's say one of those 2 or 3 teams is a better option, and it's 20% better than some of the deals that were confronted this summer. It's just all the opportunity cost, lost training camp, lost practices, lost ground in the standings that make it not worth it, in my opinion. But it's going to be Russ, 2 first-round picks, 2 or 3 quality role players. And this is a team that desperately needs quality role players. And as soon as they have them, and as soon as Anthony Davis regains form, with LeBron James playing like the top 5 player that he is, you're going to be in great shape. All right, that is all I have for tonight, guys. As always, I sincerely appreciate your support. Quick note, we are going to, there's a couple of big games tomorrow night, but we're covering them on Saturday morning. So Saturday morning, we'll have a show coming out, will not be live. Sunday night's games, we're going to be covering Monday morning, will not be live, but there will be a video coming out Monday during the afternoon. And then Tuesday, Wednesday next week, we are going live. I think the Lakers and Warriors each have a primetime game in those 2 nights. We'll be going live after those games. Don't forget as well, 30 minutes on 7 games from last night on the YouTube feed. You can find that there. Check it out if you haven't done so yet. As always, I appreciate your guys' support, and I will see you on Saturday morning.